My friend Alaura gave me this recipe. It's from her family's 1940s cookbook and it is amazing caramel. It's simple to make, it's great for beginners, and it doesn't get as high temperatures as some of the other traditional caramel recipes. Here are the ingredients, but I'll have a link below for full written recipe and nutrition information. You'll want to get started by getting out a medium saucepan, at least 3 quarts. I like to weigh the ingredients out so it's very precise, but you can use measurement cups. This is not a very sensitive ingredients as far as grams go. You want to start out with 1.5 cups of corn syrup, or 450 milliliters. And to this you're going to add in 1.5 cups of sugar, or 300 grams. To that you're going to put in 1 can, or 12 ounces of evaporated milk, and to that you're going to put in 75 grams, or 1/3 cup of butter. You can also use margarine in this recipe, although there are some recipes that say don't use corn margarine because it can become too soft. You're also going to need some vanilla and some salt, but you don't add that until the end. What I'd like to note is you want to make your pan prepped ahead of time. You want to line about an 8x8 or smaller with some aluminum foil or parchment paper and grease it well. Do not use wax paper. Wax paper and caramel stick together and it's just horrible. And also it's always a good thing to have some ice water on hand in case you burn yourself. I like to start this out a low and slow method. I like to put the lid on, put it on the lowest temperature possible, and let it just sit there and simmer for 10 minutes. This helps keep the caramels from separating. A lot of people don't understand that the whey in butter and milk can separate during caramel making process, and it will cause it to split and get really oily on top. Now, if that does happen, I do have a blog post on how to fix that, and I'll include the link below, so don't worry, it is fixable. The next thing you want to do is take your lid off. You want to get a thermometer if you're using it. If you're not using a thermometer, I'm going to show you later on how you can judge where your caramel is by using the water method. So don't worry, you don't absolutely need a thermometer. However, it is a good judge on when to expect your caramels to get done. But when I was learning how to make caramel, I never used a thermometer until recently. Now, as you see, all the sugar has been dissolved just by time. I didn't do anything but put a lid on and let it sit for 10 minutes on low. By doing this one simple step, you'll prevent your caramel from crystallizing where it gets grainy and ruins it. I love that because all you have to do now is turn your heat up to about a medium high until it starts boiling. And once it starts boiling, you want to turn it down to the lowest temperature you can get to where it still maintains a boil but doesn't boil vigorously. Can you see how thin this is? All the sugar is really nicely dissolved. I'm going to cut out parts of it so you don't have to sit and watch the whole process, because this can take anywhere from 25 to 45 minutes. I prefer to go low and slow because it will be a silkier caramel, less likely to split, and it'll be a lot smoother and chewier. As you can see, it's starting to boil slightly. Now, a lot of people will tell you to turn it up on a medium-high heat, and I used to do that, and you can see it in my blog post. I used to get it to a dangerously high temperature to where it would boil almost over the top, and it would splatter and splash me. It was just honestly not very good, and you have a high risk of burning it. By backing the temperature down to a medium-low, to where it's just got a nice gentle rolling boil like this, you won't have to worry about your caramel splitting. You won't have to worry about getting burned. You won't have to worry about a lot of things. Now, this is for my friend Alaura. I have an induction stove, and as you can see, I can wipe right onto the burner and not get burned. I love my induction stove. We were talking about it the other day, and I decided to keep that clip in. Do not do that if you have an electric stove or if you have a gas stove. You will get really burned. When you have an induction, you have a lot of leeway, and honestly, if I was using an electric stove with a glass stovetop, I would not make caramel or any hard candies, as I ruined My very first glass stove making candy, because when it hits the glass stove top that's hot, it immediately pits the glass and just ruins it. If you're going to make caramel candies and you have an electric stove top, I highly recommend going out and buying a little burner that you can plug in the wall and using that for your candies. That way you'll never have to worry about ruining your stove top. Now, as you can see, the texture is starting to change. It's getting thicker and the bubbles are getting more vigorously. So I'm going to test it for you in the water method. I'm going to show you what happens, and what you're looking for is a softball stage. You want it to be, when you drop it in the water, you want it to look like a ball, but when you push on it, it flattens. But as you can see, this is just really runny and thick. This would make a good sauce at this point. I'm going to zoom in so you can see it a little bit better. Now I want to make 2 points. When you're using the water method to test it, you want to use cold water. When you drop it in, let it sit a few seconds, because if you reach in, you're going to burn yourself really bad. I've done it. It hurts. Let it sit. Second thing, you want to stir this constantly. If you don't stir it constantly and you don't keep a good solid heat on it, you do risk it burning and you do risk it splitting. I am stopping and starting because I'm making the video and it's risky doing this. It's going to work your muscles really well, so don't do this when you're tired. And also do expect some splattering no matter how low your temperature is. And have a glass of cold water if you do get it on you. That way you can submerge your hand in it immediately. Now, as you can see, that created a ball. And it was such a nice ball that it fell off. Now this would make a nice chewy stretchy caramel at this point, and you could stop. I'm going to go a little bit further because a few of my friends like the harder kind, and I'm going to show you. See how it's starting to make a more firmer texture when you drop it in the water. I used a white bowl this time because I realized you couldn't really see that well in the green bowl. What you're looking for is a firmish type ball that when you squish it, it doesn't immediately flatten, but it will give with some resistance. I'll show you in just a second what you're looking for if you like the harder caramels. You want to cook this between 245 to 249. This right here is 249. That is 118C to 121C. Just check it around the time that it starts to thicken up and the boiling gets slower, and see what you like. You'll get to know what caramel you like the best. I actually like the softer caramels, where a lot of people like the harder caramels. Once you get to the consistency you want, turn off the heat, throw in the salt, stir it just briefly, put in the vanilla, stir that again briefly. Don't stir it too much, you could risk splitting your caramel once again. And then you're going to remove it from your heat. You're going to pour it in the 8x8 pan or the 20 centimeter pan, and you want to pour it in but not scrape it out. The reason why you don't scrape it out, even though there's all that nice delicious caramel in there, is that's where it boils up at the top and then sinks back down. That's where your chances of caramelization happens. And the caramelization is that grainy caramel where when it starts to separate it, it's just disgusting. So don't scrape it. You can keep the pan, let it cool down and eat it, scrape it out and chew on it. Have like a cook's treat there, as they call it. As it cools a little bit, if you like, you could sprinkle it with salt like I did. And then you have to let it sit for at least 2 hours. Do not touch it. You will get burned. I know this for a fact. I've tried to do it. I've gotten really nasty burns trying to touch caramel too early. Now you will remove it from the aluminum foil or parchment paper. I actually like parchment paper better because it comes off a lot cleaner. If you don't spray or grease your aluminum foil really well, it can get stuck, and you have to be careful that you don't get bits of aluminum foil left in your caramel, which is really gross. I will show you right here. You're going to have to pick some of it off, and it's really kind of resistant at times. Now I'm going to show you a really simple way to cut caramel if you're new to this, because it can be very tricky to cut caramel. Use a pizza cutter, and if you grease it first, it will slide through. I didn't do that for this recipe because I'm not thinking. You have a very low risk of getting cut this way, and it comes off really nice. If you do this, you don't have to worry about accidentally slipping and cutting your fingers as you do with a sharp knife. If it starts to get too sticky on it, all you do is run the wheel under some hot water and it will get rid of all the sticky caramel and you can continue cutting. Now if you like, you can use a knife. Again, if you use a knife, you could butter it to make it a little bit easier to slide through the caramel. Do expect it to stick sometimes. I just like to run it through hot water when it starts to stick to the point that it's getting hard to cut. A lot of times I'll use the pizza cutter because there's just such a low risk of getting hurt. And when you have disabilities, you really have to think about safety first when it comes to making any kind of food in the kitchen. I really want to thank my friend Alaura again for giving us this recipe, letting me share it with my friends and family, because this is just a fabulous caramel to start out for beginners. There's a low risk of burning. There's a low risk of failure. It's made with cheap ingredients. It's wonderful. It's really popular. It doesn't last long. It's just amazingly soft, chewy, the perfect caramel, what you want in a dessert. Go to jacksonsjob.com for more recipes and be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see future videos. Thank you. Happy baking. Good day.